I am super excited to welcome back Jacqueline Hurst, who is a leading mind and life coach. Jacqueline's going to share more of her wisdom with us today. Jacqueline's been through her own journey and has learned firsthand many of the struggles we deal with as human beings. I personally believe she's been through a lot of this to learn and share how she overcame her own obstacles in life and help others. I think that's kind of her mission in life. So today we're talking about the subject of self-worth and how this can lead to anxiety. As usual, please feel free to put your questions in the chat box and we will address them as we go along. And can I ask you please to just ensure your mics are on mute so we can not have the distraction of kind of background noises. So Jacqueline, welcome. Where are you?
Thanks for having me, Stella. Also, thanks for putting this on. I think it's just so amazing that we all get to be here together, through the power of technology. But obviously, thanks to you for organising this. I can see that we've got around 80 people on this call today, which I think is just amazing. So first of all, a big thank you to you, really, Stella, for organising this.
Oh, well, thank you for being here, because we couldn't do it without people like you who come along and give us their time and knowledge and all your valuable tools. So thank you for joining us. So I shared the link to your website in our newsletter. But before we start on the actual subject, I would like you please to just share your own story briefly, really as a backdrop to the subject matter today, because I think it's really relevant to what we're talking about and what you've been through yourself.
So I'm a life coach and I'm practicing in London, and I got to do this because you would probably look at me today and say, wow, that looks like a woman that's, always had her life together and, I'm quite polished and all this kind of thing. But it didn't start that way. So my journey started really with sort of a finding drugs when I was 15. And I had a childhood which looked amazing on the outside, and on the inside, it was a bit painful. Certain things were going on behind the scenes, which I found very difficult to understand and in turn control how I felt. So I found drugs when I was 15 and alcohol, and I got heavily involved into everything I could do or use to obliterate myself from what real life was. So I got, as I said, I did drugs, I did alcohol, I was anorexic, I suffered with depression, anxiety, I had a few breakdowns along the way. And then when I was 25, which was 10 years later, I had a decision to either continue taking the paths I was taking, which was pretty much on the floor. I was living in a squat in Camden. Did I want to continue that life, which sort of wasn't really working anymore? Or did I want to sort of change my life and start to live differently? So I had a beautiful opportunity to do it differently. And I don't quite know what it was that made it happen on that day, but I know that I sort of sat in this squat saying, like, I'm done and I've got to make these changes. And from that day, which was in August 2003, I worked very, very, very hard on changing my life by changing my mind. And I did a lot of therapy. I went through lots of different therapists, and there's definitely something to be said for therapy, which I think is very important. And there became a time where I didn't feel like people really got me or understood me because they hadn't really been there. And also I didn't really want to sit talking about how I felt all day long. Why do you feel like this? And why do you think you feel that way? And where did that come from? And I wanted solutions to living my very best life possible. I'm a big believer that life is meant to be joyous and we take a lot of it so seriously. And I think that we are here, all of us, for big things if we allow ourselves and our mind to go there. So I did a lot of work on myself. I learned about my thinking. I studied and studied and studied and studied, and then I started my business, and off I went, giving back and helping people to learn how to live a life that they love, all through the power of your mind.
It's so powerful, isn't it? And you're a living example of that. Massive kudos to you, because it could have gone badly the other way if you hadn't picked yourself up and made that decision and really taken it forward. And as we go through today's session, I wanted you to share that really as a backdrop, because that's quite an extreme version, but we all have our own versions. We all have our own versions of how we can hold ourselves back or not live a full life, as you say. So I'd like to cover that today. Let's start talking about the concept of imposter syndrome. Can you just explain to us what that means, please?
So imposter syndrome, and I see this a lot with clients, is something that if you have imposter syndrome, you ultimately think that you're a fraud and a fake, and people are going to find you out. And you have anxiety and you worry, and it's bubbling away under the surface all the time until you face it and deal with it. That's what imposter syndrome is.
And seemingly successful people suffer from this, right? So you're seeing this with people who maybe outwardly appear to be confident.
Not only outwardly appear to be confident, but people that do jobs that are, amazing, like people in the public eye, people that are QCs, I would go to sort of the top of the tree, where they go outside into public life and they think that they're going to be found out. And that's their fundamental belief, which they carry around with them and will, of course, affect how they feel, what they do, and the results.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I read in a study that there's an estimated 70% of people who experience these imposter feelings at some point in their lives. So it's really widespread and affects all kinds of people. Why do you think it's so widespread? Why do you think we have this?
I think that we are, and I'm going to say a lot of this is quite English, and I'm sure that might annoy some people, but I think a lot of our English, stiff upper lip, don't rise above your station. And I think a lot of it starts there of sort of, don't be too confident. And what's happened is we've misplaced the difference between confidence and ego. And a lot of the clients that I work with will come in, their self-worth is over here. And when I talk to them about becoming confident, they think that they're going to go right over here into ego. But there's a middle ground, and the middle ground is liking yourself, being confident in yourself, and doing it in a way where you're not, as I say, egotistical of I'm amazing, I'm the best ever. You're just saying, I think I'm all right at what I do. Like, I'm okay with it. I can be proud of myself. And it's interesting because when we are talking to other people, we could say to someone else, wow, that's amazing. You did so well. But we think that if we say that to ourselves, we're being egotistical and we're getting above our station. That's why this work around your thinking is really, really important.
Right. And do you think that affects women more than men? Because that's quite an interesting thing. Like you'll see outwardly, you'll see men be possibly a bit more confident than women. Or is that just a fallacy? Does it just appear equally? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, men and women have been brought up differently most of the time. Men are sort of, be a big boy, don't cry, you've got to be tough, which also affects men. I write for GQ magazine. We talk about this a lot, when I used to go in the office there, about how, men have got to have this kind of stance around them, to be this tough guy and not have an emotion or a feeling. So if you're suffering with imposter syndrome with that as well, that's, it's a lot of pressure. And women, we've got it on that level of what we look like, and we should be these beautiful, young leaf 20-year-olds all our life, and if you're suffering with imposter syndrome in that way as well, you've got like a double whammy. So it's all connected. But I would say that men and women, it's 50-50.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've shared this before with this group, but I'm very open with this group. Sometimes I think I'm going to live to regret this in the future at some point. But I've always had these feelings of not being quite good enough, and somebody told me once, oh, put a card on your desk which reminds you, think about how far you've come rather than how far you've got to go. Because, no matter how well I do, I always feel like I need to do more. I need to do more, or I haven't got to the level I want to get. So that kind of these unrealistic, I don't know, there could be realistic goals or unrealistic goals, but I always feel like there's more that needs to be done. So it's not good enough. And I'm not sure. I mean, where do you think that comes from? I've spoken to a lot of people who have that same, feeling.
I think there's two things that you're saying. I think you're starting off with the I'm not good enough, which is over here. And then you've got the I need to do more, which is over here. So it's two separate subjects. So the first I'm going to say is I don't think that we were born to feel like we aren't good enough. I don't think any of us were put here on this planet to feel like that. And I don't know what society or culture has taught us to think that that's okay. But in my book, that is like not the right way to be waking up in the morning and thinking. Who decides whether you're good enough? That's a question to ask yourself. Do you get someone else to decide that for you? Or are you going to be powerful enough to say, actually, I get to decide my worth? So you need to understand it on that level as well. So believing that you are or are not good enough is actually a choice. And it does come down to your thinking, right? So that's not my job to do for you. That's your job to do for you, to decide and make a choice that you are good enough. And then to ask yourself the question of, what will my life look like if I did start to believe that thought? If I really did start to believe I was good enough, what would I do differently? And I always find that so powerful when I speak to my clients, because they start to see their whole life differently. Like, my God, if I really thought I was good enough, I would go for that job, or I would wear this dress that I love in my wardrobe, but I'm a bit nervous to, or I would, call the guy that I quite fancy. And life starts to expand. And that's what we're here for. Then just flipping over into that other subject that you just said of like, it's not good enough, it's not good enough. I think that's also really detrimental, because what you're doing there is you're constantly trying to get to the destination. And the problem with getting to the destination is twofold. Number one, you've missed the journey, which is actually the whole point. And number two, when you've got to the destination, you're not going to embrace that destination because you think there's something next. We've all done it, right? Where we've had something that we've really wanted to get. Let's say we say, right, I have fallen in love with this pen, and it's quite expensive, this pen. It's a bit more than most pens, but I want to get this pen. So I'm going to save for this pen. Then you get the pen. And my question is, how good do you feel when you've got that pen if you then think you've got to get the next pen? Like, you've missed it. So it's the syndrome of always trying to get there is going to be problematic, because you're never going to find joy. And a lot of that is about turning it down and looking at your thoughts and looking at what you think you're going to get when you have this pen. Because really what you think you're going to get when you have that pen is the feelings of feeling good. But the beauty of your mind is when you understand how to think properly, you can feel good with or without the pen. And the pen is then secondary.
Yeah, I guess the pen is becomes a visible manifestation of supposedly your success or your own self-achievement. And I think in a way we've been all brought up in this society where we have to visibly show how successful we are, and when we start to recognize that actually, as you say, the joy is in what you're doing to get there, or your own feelings of your own mission in life, or whatever it is that you feel makes you feel good about yourself. When we realize that, it's like the other side of the coin, and it's like we're flipping the coin, and we kind of go, actually, it isn't about owning the pen, or it isn't about showing to other people or showing to myself that I've made it. It's interesting. I mean, I think a lot of it may come from upbringing, from schooling, from, as you say, society. The British have it. I'm sure the Americans who have their own problems, but I'm sure they. We might talk about that today. But I'm sure a lot of those people who are, maybe not as, they don't have that stiff upper lip, maybe they, but even they have self-worth issues. So I don't know, I think it's almost like our whole way of living has been put together to decrease our self-worth. Or am I being too dramatic about that?
No, I think in some ways you're right. Like, first of all, I want to say, just going back, just rewinding a little bit about success, you have to decide what success means to you. And we must not buy into what goes on outside in society, because society will constantly tell you that you're not good enough, and you need to buy this product to be prettier, and you must buy this to be thinner, and you should have that Ferrari to be, and then everyone will love you. And all of that is just a very clever marketing tool. And when we're away from ourselves, we buy into that stuff. Now, I'm not saying that any of this stuff is wrong. If you love Ferraris, knock yourself out, right? I love beautiful jewelry. It's something I love. I love design. I love the creativity. I love the beauty of the gem itself. I love all of that. Now, all of that's great. And that fundamentally, anything outside of myself is not really going to give me what I want. What I want comes from my thinking. It's all about my thinking, because it's what I think that generates how I feel. And there's noise around you from the minute you wake up in the morning. There's noise in the news, and there's noise, from your friends. There's noise everywhere. And it just depends how much of that do you want to tune into. And that's the important thing. And, we're talking about self-worth today, Stella. Self-worth comes from your thinking, not from the size of your arse, and not from how much money you've got in your bank, right? Or who you're dating. It comes from your head. And I think if people can really understand that, we start to break free of these shackles.
Right. Yes. Yes. Totally agree. Okay. How about perfectionism? Because, I've seen that over and over again, where people are just so obsessed with having everything perfectly done or being perfect that it actually impacts their self-worth, because they've set such high standards. Can we talk about that a little bit?
Definitely. I mean, for me, I believe that perfectionism is a fear of failure. And perfectionism, I've worked with over 6,000 people. I think at the end of this year, I think we're pushing those numbers up. But I've never met a perfect one, never. And I've worked with loads of different types of people. And I just don't know what that is. What is a perfect person meant to be, right? What is that we think is real? Which can't be, because being human means we are imperfectly perfect. Let's put it like that. There is no such thing as this, it's like a Hollywood movie. It all looks fantastic from the outside, and we can escape into that. But real life isn't that. Real life is, doing the dishes, the postman turning up and you're out. It's all about being imperfect, isn't it? And that's what life's about. So when you're suffering and struggling with perfectionism, the first question I would want for you to ask yourself is, why do you think having that thing of being perfect is going to make you, what is it going to give you? What do you think you're going to get by being perfect? And what does perfect look like? And another great question is, this perfect vision that you think that you should be, how if you had that, how sustainable would that be? Can you feed your kids without getting, mushy banana down you, staying perfect? How sustainable is it? And a lot of the time, people are just in this fantasy world of what their life would be like if they wouldn't fail. And it's very, very restricting, and it's very uncomfortable. And you're also missing your moment because you think you should be there. And again, it's the same thing, isn't it? If I was there, life would be better. But it's not about being there. It's about being in your head and feeling those feelings now, not when you think you are perfect, X, Y, and Z.
Yeah. I'm just going to digress a little bit, because, this work that we're talking about, we're both big fans of Dr. Wayne Dyer, who wrote lots of books around the power of the mind. And he's got lots of famous quotes, but I think about that. I think when I started reading his books, that's when my life changed. That's when I really realized the power of my mind and the thoughts I was telling myself, and that I was believing, excuse my French, everybody, but I was believing my own bullshit. So I was believing that I wasn't good enough, or this was a failure, or this was great, or whatever it was. And I started to really recognize that the more, your thoughts are not facts. They're not, it doesn't mean that you think something, it's a fact. It's just, it's just something that your mind's telling you. It doesn't mean it's for real. So I think with self-worth, we can get caught up in all this kind of self-talk, can't we, of what our mind's telling us, that we actually start to believe it.
Yeah. And I think also, when it comes to self-worth, I would want you to question yourself, like, what is self-worth for me? What does it mean? What does being, having self-worth, what actually does that mean for me? Because everyone's going to be different, right? And who, like I said before, who defines my worth? You see, Stella, if I give you the power to define my worth and my value, I've got a big problem, because you can either give it to me and then I can feel great, but what happens when you take it away? And that is, in my opinion, us building our foundations, on sand instead of brick. So it's not your job to define my worth, right? It's not for you to tell me if I'm worthy or of value. It's not society to tell me if I'm of worth or of value. It's not for Vogue magazine to tell me if I'm of worth or of value. It's not for a boyfriend to do that for me, or a lover or a mother or your brother. It's you. You're the one that gets to decide, okay, I'm going to choose to believe in myself just today, even just for an hour. I'm going to believe I might be of worth. And again, even when you start to change that thinking, you're going to start to change your feeling and your actions and your results. So the power's in your hands. I don't like when people think that they don't have self-worth, because to me, some of that, and of course, there's a lot around this, because it's what we've learned, it's our belief systems, it's our culture, et cetera, et cetera. But a lot of that is, and some people won't like this, it's a victim mentality of like, poor me, I'm not good enough. And I'm like, well, let me just hang on, I'll just find my violin. And, but it's like, why would we do that to ourselves? Why not be our number one fans and our best supporters, like we would to our best friends?
Yeah, again, it's coming back to, because we think then we're too egotistical or we're too big-headed to do that. But what's wrong with that? And again, that comes back to society and upbringing. And, we've set those neural pathways. But what tips would you say? I mean, what should people do every day to remind themselves of that fact? Because it's almost like we have to reprogram our thinking, right?
It is about reprogramming your thinking. And one of the things I like to tell my clients to do is the good old sticky notes. And I remember when I was getting better, when I was really young, and I had to learn about my value and my worth. And I would put sticky notes in places saying, you are valuable, you are worthy, you can do this, you're deserving, you're a loving person, you're kind, right? You are of worth. And when you stick it around your apartment, or nowadays, I suppose, because, we've got technology, you can put a diary note in your phone. You are of value, right? Every time you see that, it starts to go into your brain. Why would you choose not to think that you're of value? That's really the question. Like, why would you choose to do that to yourself? It's not kind. And I think that's the other thing, is that somehow we've been brought up to think that if we whip ourselves into this place, then we're going to get there. But definitely what I learned through my journey, and it's ongoing, I don't think I've got there, by the way, but as one progresses, the more I go along, the more I learn that actually to get where I want to be has to come from me being really nice and loving to myself, rather than beating myself up, which of course I was a pro at. And I think many of us are, until we learn that actually that's going to take us in the wrong direction. You can't hate yourself happy. You just can't.
Yeah. So you have to love yourself happy. And then to have constant reminders. I mean, that's a really good point about the phone, even having an alarm on that allows you to remind yourself to look at that message. And it sounds really corny. It sounds like a little bit twee, and people are like, oh God, that's a bit, pathetic. But actually it really works if you're constantly reminding yourself of that same message over and over, that I'm worthy of this. I believe in all those things that you said.
I think if we find it twee and a bit pathetic, which I definitely did in the beginning, when I had help, I had a sponsor and he was 82 and he made me do these things. We'd row a lot. And I would say, oh, that's so ridiculous. Why would I want to do that? And he would say to me, okay, then don't get better. And it would really annoy me. But I think what happened was when I started to think like, oh, that is ridiculous, really what we're saying there is like, that's so uncomfortable for me. That's really what we mean. It's not that it's ridiculous, it's that it's uncomfortable because we've not learned to love ourselves. We're really good at not liking ourselves, and we're really not so good at learning to love ourselves. So it is uncomfortable in the beginning. It would be weird if you didn't think that.
Isn't that weird that our mind is actually naturally programmed not to love ourselves? So we should, or maybe it is programmed, but as where you see young children and you see, babies and young children, and they're so joyous and they don't have all these hang-ups and they're really, kind of enjoying life. And then as we get older, we program ourselves not to be like that. It's crazy.
I think it's programming from outside of ourselves, but I think that's why this is a great conversation to have, because underneath all of that, we're still those kids. That is still who we are, right? I'm still, look, I mean, I might be a bit different, but I, as an adult, jump in puddles. It still makes me happy. Why should I not, right? Just because I'm an adult and it's not the thing to do. Like, I just don't believe in that way of thinking. So you've got that as a kid. You run around like you're the queen or the king of the world. You've got superpowers. You've got a cape behind you. You're sure that you can. Well, actually, as an adult, you can get back there, right? You can if you do your work.
Yeah, I'm actually finding as I get older, I'm becoming more liberated, and I care less what people think because I do stupid things in the in public. I've had a private comment come in which I just want to tackle, which is a sad comment. There's someone here who has been in abusive relationships and has no confidence and self-worth. So she cares about other people, but she doesn't love herself. So she doesn't love herself, and she doesn't care if she lives or dies, basically. Can we give her some advice? I know that's quite, a detailed, sorry, not detailed, but quite a strong situation to be in, difficult situation. Can we give this lady some advice on what she should do next?
So the first thing I'm going to say is that comment at the end is really important. And if that is how she feels, I don't know her name, and that's fine. But if that is how she feels, I would say, please get in contact with me after this. This isn't something I normally do. But if that is how you feel, please contact me and I can help you myself, or definitely point you in the right directions of where to go to get some help, because you don't have to do this alone. Second of all, I want to say to you, I've been there and I've experienced exactly what you're saying right now. And sometimes when we don't have self-worth and we don't love ourselves, we definitely do get into relationships that are abusive and very, very painful. And the beautiful part about where you're at now is that breakdowns create breakthroughs. And you can be someone who's going through this space right now, and you don't have to see the end of the path, but I'm standing at the end of the path saying, hi, I've been there. And I promise you, this will be the making of you if you want to be brave enough to do your work. Because what I teach a lot of my clients, and I've had to learn myself, is when I'm pointing my finger out, he did this, he said that, it's his fault, it's this, I'm really missing the point. And what I have to do is, instead of pointing outwards at the person, I've got to point inwards at me. And I've got to say, what am I doing here to allow this? Why have I got this issue? Why am I not kinder to myself? Why am I accepting abusive behavior? What am I allowing that I shouldn't be allowing? Which parts of me am I hating, right? And start to focus on your part in this, getting help to feel better. So this can be the beginning of something amazing, which has nothing to do with your partner. And your partner has been a mirror holding it up to you to say, this is where you need to do your work.
Yeah, that's great feedback, really is, absolutely. Okay, so let's move on to how feelings of unworthiness can lead us to anxiety. I guess if we're always doubting ourselves, we find it difficult to make decisions, and then we get anxious. What's your line of thinking around that?
I'm a big believer, as I've been banging on, and I know I sound like a broken record, and I'm kind of all right with that because hopefully I'm making a point. I'm a big believer that it all starts and ends in your mind. What you think about is ultimately what comes back to you, and what you think about creates how you feel. So if you're feeling anxious, I would suggest to you to get your pen and get your paper and start to write down what you're thinking. Once you've written down your thoughts, you can have a look at those thoughts, in pen and paper. There's something very powerful about that. And you can ask yourself if these thoughts that you're having are working for you or against you. Number one. And I'm pretty sure they're all going to be, no, these are working against me. Then I would say, okay, would I say this to someone else in this position? Would I say, you're an idiot, you're never going to get this done, don't bother reaching higher, etc., etc., etc. And then I would say to you, if you could try to reframe these thoughts, how could you do that? Looking at every single thought separately. My question that you should be asking yourself is, how could I think about this differently? That's like one of my favorite questions I ever ask my clients and of myself. How can I think about this differently? If I'm feeling a feeling that doesn't feel good, how can I think about this differently? We don't have any control over situations in our life, right? I've got no control over how someone else thinks, what they say, what they do, what they don't do. I can't control that. I can't control that I'm in a lockdown, right? I can't control that. I can't control if my plane is delayed or if it's raining outside. But what I 100% can control, and as a control freak, I need to know something I can control, and that is always my thinking. So if you're a control freak too, just remind yourself that the only thing you've got there, which is actually the most important thing, is to control your head, control what you're thinking, and find ways to think about your situation that feels good. Or don't sit in the pain. It's your decision, right?
Right. Very valuable advice there. Thank you. How about behavior that harms us, that can come from lack of self-worth? I think, you gave us some extreme examples of what you went through as a younger woman, but there are other more kind of subtle behaviors, like maybe overeating, a little bit of, bit of alcohol, overdoing it on the alcohol, maybe lots of anger, irritation. Again, coming back to that kind of underachieving or overachieving issue. How can this manifest itself in different ways that people can be aware and kind of go, oh, look, that's what happens to me, and this is why? Because I think people have certain patterns of behavior that they may not be aware what the origin of that behavior is.
I think having things like that is always a real bonus, because let's talk about, overeating, for example, which is complex and there's lots of things attached to that. But a lot of the work I do with clients that's, struggling with binge eating or overeating, I always like to say that, when their hand's in the cookie jar for the 27th cookie, it's never about the cookie. It's always about what's really going on for you. And all of these things are coping mechanisms. We're trying to cope with something. And the question we want to ask ourselves when our hand's in the cookie jar for the 27th time is, what's actually happening for me today? It's a very simple question. It's quite powerful. And if you just, and you don't have to stop eating the cookies, by the way, because that is not the answer. The answer is to work out what's going on for you mentally in order to feel better, in order to take a different action and stop eating the cookies. It's not just change the action. It's all about changing the thinking. So if you're asking yourself, well, what's really going on for me? That's where you're going to find the goals. And it's going to be something like, you know, I'm overtired. I didn't sleep well last night. I've had a row with my boyfriend. I'm worried about my job, you know, and it's going to be all these different things that have got nothing to do with eating. And when you can start to look at what's really going on behind the scenes, that's when you can start to help yourself. Again, this isn't always easy to do on your own. That's why there's people like me out there and coaches out there that can help you through this. But it's interesting, isn't it, how we say, oh my God, I've got an emotional eating problem. That's my problem. That's my problem. And we stay focused on the action of the eating. And that's just a symptom of the problem. The problem is what's going on in your head. And most likely how unkind you're being to yourself.
Yeah, no.
I don't know why we all think we're meant to be these perfect people. This is what we were saying before. It's like, where did we get that? And what, you know, we're all human. We're all doing the best we can with what we've got. And it's like, if we could just turn that down a little bit and learn to just be, right? Like slow down and learn to just be. Everything gets a lot easier. Slowing down is really important.
Yeah. Yeah. I sometimes tell people the story that when I started my business, I was working like a mad person. It's quite ironic, really. I started a well-being company and I worked like a crazy person for a number of years. And then I had this adrenal burnout. And it was actually when I started to relax that things eased up and the business started to do better. So kind of energetically things shifted at that time. It's a really interesting perspective, but I think we just put a lot of pressure on ourselves because we've just been trained to do that. You know, it's through our education system, it's through just how we live that's made us do that. But it's interesting. And the thing about the overeating, yeah, that's absolutely one example of what is happening with me right now. Why am I feeling this? And it could be, as you say, it could be something as small as I just didn't sleep well and I need more energy, so I'm turning to sugar. So it could be as simple as that, or something much more profound. And it really is all about that self-awareness, isn't it? Like really getting into understanding ourselves, and we run away from those feelings, don't we?
We do. And, you know, I say this a lot, like the very worst thing that can happen is a feeling. Like the worst thing we're all running away from when we're in that space is a negative feeling. And feelings aren't going to kill us, right? But they are there to show us, like a light, you know, a light along the path, to show us that we need to think differently about something that's happening. And that's the key. It's like saying to ourselves, right, whatever I'm feeling here doesn't feel good. What am I thinking that's making me feel that way? And how can I reframe how I think? Now, feelings aren't wrong. I don't want anyone to think that, you know, if they've got a sad feeling or an upset feeling or whatever, there's nothing wrong with having a negative feeling. What's wrong is sitting in it for longer than you need to. And you get to decide how long you need to do it, right? But, you know, we don't have to sit in that space. And we change our feelings by changing our thinking and our thoughts. So it's important that we understand that.
I've had a question again privately sent. What's the difference between a coach and a therapist, and which one is best for which type of situation? This always comes up.
Yeah, it's a great question. So therapy is a very long running, usually kind of weekly process to delve into, you know, your past, your mind, how you're feeling. It's a slow burn. It can be very gentle, and it's a very safe space for you to sit down and just get it all out. And a therapist, it's not a therapist's job to tell you what to do, They are really there to sort of listen and help you get to that space yourself. Now, some therapists you'll go and see a therapist and they'll say, okay, look, it's probably better that you do this, you do that. But most of the time they don't. You know, again, I can't say to you, this is exactly how therapy works, because every therapist will work differently. But mainly you go there and you have a really safe space to like get it out. And it's a beautiful process. That's therapy. With coaching, it's faster and it's sort of solution led, and it's sort of, it could be results driven. And it's very much, and should be, about teaching clients how to become an adult and then learn the tools and techniques to get your thinking right as an adult, stepping away from sort of childhood, emotional childhood into emotional adulthood. And then you say to your clients, bye-bye, off you go and do it. And that's more, that's what I would say is the difference between coaching and therapy.
Okay, thank you. That's yeah, it's a question that often comes up, and people often look for like, what's the difference with a clinical psychotherapist? What's different with it? Do you know that?
You know, there's so many different ways of doing this. You know, there's clinical therapy, there's psychotherapy, there's psychologists. I mean, there's a million different things, and I would say to you, I'm not the person to ask about the difference between all of those. There's lots of different places to go, and I don't know the answer to the difference between all of them.
So what the people who come to see you, what are their broad issues? Does it mainly come down to this self-worth issue?
I mean, I have people come to see me for all different things, and I work with all different types of people on all different issues and all different problems. Mainly, when you pull it all apart, it comes down to a self-worth thing, that fundamentally we don't think that we're good enough. So that's really the basis of a lot of the issues and problems people come in with. And then it's unraveling that to teach people how to think differently around that.
Okay. What's your view on affirmations? I use affirmations quite a lot. Again, they scare a lot of people because they just sound weird, and people are like, oh, what is that? I'm just, repeating the same thing over and over. Have you ever used affirmations in your work? What's your view?
Look, again, I'm going to say to you, everyone's different, right? So just because I think this, it doesn't mean it's right. But it's right for me. I love the idea of an affirmation. I love the idea of like standing in the mirror and going, you're confident, you're confident, you're confident. But my issue with that is, if I don't believe that thought, what's the point of me doing it? Like, I'm very kind of, unless I believe it, I can't change it. So standing there saying the same thing over and over again that I just don't believe to be true, I think for me is a waste of my time. I would rather find out what I'm thinking, right? What's the thought I've got that's creating my pain, right? Making me take all the wrong actions and getting completely the wrong results, right? If it starts in my thought, what's the thought? And push myself to reframe and change a thought to something that I do believe in, that then will make me feel better. Then I can stand in the mirror and say that new thought all day long because I believe it. Then I'm like, bring it on. But I don't want to stand in the mirror saying something I don't believe. Not for me.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I would suggest that would be for most people then, right? If you don't believe it, what's the point of just repeating it over and over? Unless you can train your mind to start believing it at some point.
I mean, look, everybody does this differently, and who am I to say this is the only way to do it? Like, that would be wrong of me to say. For some people, that, they might find standing in a mirror saying, I'm confident, that might really help them. And I'm, whatever it takes to help you get to that space, I'm like, bring it on and do it times 1,000. If that's what you think is going to help you, try it out and give it a go.
Yeah.
Right? For me personally, wouldn't make a difference.
Right. Okay. Well, if anyone's interested in affirmations, Louise Hay was the queen of affirmations, so you can look her up. She's written many books about that. Okay. Now, finally, I think I've come across this quite a bit too. People who work in big companies like corporations, They could have like high self-worth when they're at home or with their families or with their people around them that they feel they're comfortable with. And as soon as you put them in this workspace where they could be less supportive, let's say, those deep feelings of lack of self-worth, come out. Have you come across, I'm sure you've come across this, but then have you got any advice for people in that situation?
I would say the same thing again, really. It's like, if you are feeling strong and worthy at home, but you're not in your work, the question is, what's going on in that what's going on in that environment that's different from this environment? And the only thing that's going to be different isn't actually the environment. It's the thoughts you've got. Because you're choosing the right thoughts when you're at home because you feel good. And then you're not choosing very good thoughts when you're in a working environment because you don't feel good. So we don't blame the environment. We blame, or don't blame, but it's not, maybe that's not the right word. We don't put the problem on the environment. We've got to put the problem on our thinking. What am I thinking when I step through the doors into this office that's making me feel less than or not good enough? Because remember, it's got nothing to do with the person, place, or thing, and everything to do with you and your thinking.
Yeah, I guess a lot of it can be fearful situations, fear of losing your job, fear of being found out, fear of whatever, fear of lots of fears. So again, not having that fear about losing or being found out, or all those feelings of unworthiness again, right?
I mean, if you're having that thought about, like we said in the beginning, imposter syndrome, of this sort of fear of being found out, the first thing I would say to you is like, can you have a look at your evidence of why you should be that? And I really mean that. Like, get your pen and paper, the good old pen and paper, and start to, instead of like blah blahing about the negative, how about doing it differently and saying, okay, let me actually get pure facts, which I love. I'm big on facts, big. What is my fact? What is my evidence of why I should be a lawyer? If I'm a lawyer, what are the facts and the evidence of why I absolutely deserve to be sitting in this office today? Oh, I passed the bar. Oh, I took a degree. Oh, I won this case, blah, 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 blah. And it's very hard to go against yourself when you've got evidence in front of you. That would be insanity, right? And none of us are insane. I don't think, sitting on this call today. There might be some insane people, but it would be really, really insane of us to go, I passed all these tests and I won these cases, and these people that I work for have given me the job as a lawyer because they've seen that too, right? And here's all my facts, but I'm going to look the other way. It's like, what? What? You can't.
Sure. Yeah, it's again the stories we tell ourselves, isn't it? So just remembering that. It's interesting because sometimes something just came to my mind. Sometimes, I could be somewhere with my husband in some beautiful location or something, and I'll say, how lucky are we? I'll just make that statement. How lucky are we? And he says, it's nothing to do with luck. You've earned it. You've achieved it. But my first reaction is to say, oh, I'm lucky, And again, I think that comes down to this imposter syndrome. A lot of people have that in the workplace, where even though they've been successful, they've passed the bar or whatever it is that they've done, they still think it's luck. I was in the right place. I've heard that so many times when I've said to people, oh, wow, that's really good. And they'll say, I was just in the right place at the right time, and it's just really interesting. It's so prevalent. And now you've uncovered it. It's such a prevalent way of thinking, I think, with so many people.
I think so too. I think it was Gerald Ronson. I think it was him. Don't quote me, but I think it was him that said, it's really funny that the harder I work, the luckier I get. And I think that's really clever. I also think that I'm very, very spiritual, and I'm very much a believer that as long as I put my work in and I do the best I can, right? Which isn't like, nose to the grind and pushing and overachieving and perfectionism. It isn't that. It's just, I'm going to do the best I can today. As long as I've done that, the universe has a very clever way of lining up for you. And if you're brave and you're willing to do it differently and to sort of give it your best, and then learn to sort of release it, it just all lines up exactly how it's meant to. And there's a form of surrender, which I know us type A personalities are like, what do you mean surrender? No, I've got to work harder. But actually, when we learn the gift and the beauty of that surrender, that's when all the good things come together, right? So standing there, Stella, and going, aren't I lucky? It's something that you would want to look at and say, you know, I've worked hard for this, you know, and the universe has lined up for me. And isn't this a beautiful, beautiful thing? And maybe changing it to more about gratitudes.
Yes, blessed. Yes.
Right.
Yes,
Right.
absolutely. Absolutely. Totally agree. Yeah, it's just, it's interesting. It's just refocusing and retraining our minds. I have another question that's coming privately. Any tips for coaching yourself re positive changes, especially to reflect on over lockdown? Not really sure what that means, but I think just personally, I would say now is a time to do this. Now is a time where you're not rushing around, and you can reflect and do this pen and paper exercise that Jacqueline talks about. Anything you want to add to that, Jacqueline?
No, I think that's completely right. I think that, you know, I would just urge everybody to just be really kind to yourself. Just, you know, wake up and remind yourself to be kind. You know, what would I do if I was being kind to myself? Or maybe I would take 15 more minutes to like just enjoy my coffee this morning and look out the window and be grateful that it's not raining and the sunshine. Like, that's what I would do if I was kind. And the more we ask ourselves that kind of question, the more we can flow with life much easier.
Yeah. And they could actually enroll to your life coaching class, right? Life class, yes.
I always forget.
Do you want to just tell us about that a little bit?
So I obviously work with people one-to-one privately on Zoom. And I also have a school online, which is called thelifeclass.com. And it runs 2 courses. One course is to train to become a life coach yourself, which I take you through. And you can learn how to actually become a certified life coach, which right now the world needs you. So if this is something that you're interested in, please, you know, have a look and reach out to me. We're having lots of people join up, and it's great because we need more people that people can talk to. And also I have a short course on there called the Foundation course, which is going to teach you, it's like a self-development course that you take yourself, and it's 6 modules, it's videos, notes and worksheets. And you go through it yourself and you learn how to have really strong thinking and learn basically everything I've been talking about today. You do it for yourself.
Sounds great.
Thanks. Thanks for reminding me.
I may just do that. Yeah. Okay. Wonderful. Okay. Well, I think we're nearing the end of our hour. Unless anyone else has any questions they want to type in, I think we're ready to wrap it up.
Thank you so much to everybody who's been here today. And it's been a real honor for me that, you know, even if someone has just taken, you know, one thing from this conversation, then I'm very happy. So thank you for everyone's time.
Thank you, Jacqueline, for being with us and sharing your great tips and your wisdom and your knowledge.